Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining this SSI webinar. My name is Sophia Witt. I'm the Director of Outreach and Development for Students Supporting Israel. Today, we have Representative Alma Hernandez, who is a member of the Democratic Party of the Arizona House of Representatives, representing District 3. She was elected in 2018 to succeed term-limited State Representative Macario. Am I saying that right? Macario?
Yes.
And she was the first
Yes.
American Jew to win an elected position in American history. So she has a truly inspiring story and background, and she's going to discuss with us her pro-Israel activism from college up until now and why it's important to have bipartisan support for Israel. So without further ado, I'm going to let Representative Alma Hernandez take the stage.
Awesome. Well, thank you all for having me. I am very honored to be able to join you all. It's exciting to see the work that you're all doing to ensure that students are active and involved in the pro-Israel community. But first and foremost, my name is Alma Hernandez, and I was born and raised here in Arizona. And I serve a district where I was born and raised. My involvement in pro-Israel activity actually began in high school. When I was a freshman in high school, I was working and doing things with APAC at the time. And I'm still very much involved, but that was really where my involvement began. I then went on to college, of course. I went to the University of Arizona, where I was very much involved there as well. And I actually ended up being the president of the Pro-Israel Club on campus, which we called CAP-PAC Wildcat for Israel. I know that the Arizona State University also has a similar PAC that used to get together and do a lot of work around Israel. And I was very proud and honored to be able to join that group on campus, because I noticed one thing: when it comes to Israel, we shouldn't make it partisan. It's a bipartisan effort that we should be leading, regardless of what our opinions are on other issues. At the end of the day, when we're being advocates for Israel, we have to do what we can to support Israel in a positive way. So I'm very honored that at the legislature, you go in serving in office and you don't think that that's going to really follow you in the work that you're doing. And actually, last year, we voted on a bill that would make it illegal for the state boycott to be involved with BDS within business at the state level. So I was very proud and honored to be able to vote for that bill, because when I used to work on the anti-BDS work on campus and working across the country doing that sort of work, I never thought it was going to follow me at the Capitol. So I was really excited to be one of a few Democrats who voted for that bill. Because of obviously the importance of being able to do work with Israel and collaborate and not demonize Israel because of BDS. So that was part of where it all began. Was in high school, went on to college, and then now in the legislature, I've been able to do a lot of work related to Israel. We actually took a really big group of legislators, it was 31 of us, who went to Israel on a mission. It was a bipartisan trip, and we all ended up going out there. And it was my second time going, but it was a first for many of my fellow legislators. And it was important for them to see what Israel is, what happens in Israel, what the culture is like, what the food is like, and just get to know it on a personal level. So I was really proud to be able to help organize that group of legislators who went. And now I'm sitting here, and I'm a little sad that we ended the session and the anti-Semitism bill that I was working on did not quite make it out of the Senate. But I'm really excited that we at least started the conversation at the legislature. So for me, my involvement in the pro-Israel world has started, years ago, but it continues with my professional work now as a legislator.
Thank you.
I don't know if my internet is.
Can you hear me?
Yes, got it.
Okay. I'm gonna let everyone open it up to questions for you. If anybody wants to start, please just feel free to unmute yourself. I muted all of you, so I apologize for that. If you don't know how to unmute yourself, I can do it for you. I do have a question for you though. So you did mention that you were working on a bill that didn't quite get past the Senate. Are there any plans to redo that or try to push a new bill? What are your plans
Most definitely.
for future anti-Semitism?
So the plan is to continue the work that I started. Yeah, so the plan is really to reintroduce that bill once session begins again in January. With everything that's going on with COVID, of course, our plans didn't go as planned. So the bill that we were working really hard on, we actually, the way it works in Arizona, we have 90 legislators. So we have 60 House reps, and then we have 30 senators. And out of the 90 total, I was able to get 84 co-sponsors, for my legislation, which is huge. The fact that we were able to get the overwhelmingly support of both parties to sign on to a bill that would, define what anti-Semitism is in our state. And, the goal is to be able to bring it back in January when session begins again. I'm looking forward to it. It was a difficult thing to see it die because we weren't able to go back and vote on other bills that were not related to COVID. But I'm really looking forward to what we will be able to do in the next few months with this bill. It's definitely coming back. I'm not going to let it go. I'm going to continue pushing for it. And, if and when I get reelected, because our elections are in August, then I'm going to continue working on where I left off.
Amazing. Was it affected by COVID, or what was the issue with passing it?
Yeah, so the bill really, it made it all the way through the Senate. It actually passed out of the House. It was 52-8, which was, we still had the majority of those supporting. It went on to the Senate. And when it went over to the Senate, what happens, it has to go through committees. It has to then go on to the floor for a vote. It didn't quite make it to the floor for a vote because we were in the situation where right before we were about to vote on other remaining legislation, we had to shut down because of COVID. So it was a little unfortunate that we weren't able to continue pushing for it. And when session ended, that means all the bills die at that point. So my goal is to be able to bring it back. Hopefully in January, the situation with COVID won't be as bad, and we'll be able to work on other legislation and not just COVID-related legislation.
Thank you. So we have a question in the comments. What would you say is the best way to increase democratic support for Israel at a time when there are representatives like Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar continuously trying to push the party through far left hatred?
Yeah, so my biggest thing, and I am very proud to be a Democrat, and I've been involved with the party since I was 14. And my biggest thing is you can't just leave a party or remove yourself from the conversations because you don't agree with these folks, right? I consider myself a progressive, and I'm very proud to have support, a very broad support in the community. But at the end of the day, when it comes to issues like Israel, I'm not quiet, and I'm a strong advocate for it because I know that if I don't do it, no one else will. So it puts us in a very difficult position when you're coming in from the outside and you want to change people's minds when it comes to Israel. So my biggest thing is always sharing those personal stories and making sure that when you're having conversations in regards to Israel, you're bringing back all the commonalities that we have, in the US, or whether you're Hispanic or Latino or Native American, whatever it is that you are, you have to be able to bring it back and put a story, like a real story to it. And that's been one of the biggest things that I've seen is people have changed their mind and opinions on Israel because they see that Israel isn't as horrible as people make it out to be. So, it's difficult sometimes when you have certain elected officials who are very vocal and being anti-Israel, but at the end of the day, we have to continue pushing and making sure that we're at least having a seat at the table, because if we leave, no one else is going to do it. I'll give you a perfect example of that. I actually am now one of the delegates for Vice President Biden. And part of the reason why I ran to be a delegate, knowing that we probably won't have a convention, is in Arizona, we will be having a fight when it comes to foreign policy. And when it comes to Israel, I've already seen there's some language being passed around that I don't necessarily agree with. That's part of the reason why I ran to be a delegate is I don't want to sit behind the scenes and not be involved in making sure that we're keeping a positive light when it comes to Israel. So I guess in short, you have to continue to have these conversations with folks. You'll always be able to find something in common. Even if you don't agree with them necessarily, you know, I respectfully disagree with both Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib and with Congresswoman Ilhan Omar. I don't agree with them. And when it comes to Israel, it is upsetting sometimes that they are given more attention because of the things and the rhetoric that they bring, but we have to continue pushing against that.
Thank you. So the next question is also in the comments. It is, the bill received a 52-8 vote. Are you concerned about the 8? And are these individuals ones that are hyper anti-Israel? Or do you know why they didn't vote for the bill?
Yeah, so I'll be very honest. I was very disappointed when the vote happened, and I actually wrote in the Times of Israel. There's an article that came out right after with sharing my disappointment on the turnout of that vote. I had a commitment from our Democratic leadership, because the entire Democratic leadership voted against the bill. There are 4 people in leadership, so for me it was very difficult to have been told at the beginning that they were supporting, and then the day of the vote they switched their vote. For me, that was difficult for many reasons, because I thought this bill was a no-brainer and should have, you know, bipartisan support and pass unanimously. I didn't see an issue with it, especially when we had folks come in from the community that have had experiences with anti-Semitism, that have come by and talked to us about the importance of having it. You know, when we have the Police Officers Association coming in and saying this would help us do our job better when it comes to reporting, it's a little disheartening to see that they voted against it. So, sure, I know that they had told me before they were voting for it, ended up switching their vote. There is one member who I respectfully disagree with when it comes to this. She happens to be Palestinian, and she serves on our Democratic leadership, and I know she has very strong feelings and opinions when it comes to Israel. And her and I have had these conversations where we will most likely never agree on the issue of Israel, but we can at least be respectful to one another and not bash each other. So I haven't done that, and I would hope that I get the same respect from my colleagues. But it was disheartening to see that it didn't pass unanimously. We did have 2 Republicans that voted against it. One of them felt that it was infringing on people's First Amendment rights, which is not at all what the bill was doing. The other one just usually votes against any Democratic bill, so it became very partisan at that point. So it was unfortunate to see how that went down, but I'm hopeful that next year when we bring it back, we'll have the same amount of support that I had the first time.
Amazing. Another question is, what is your family background, and what was your experience growing up as a Jew with Mexican ancestry? Did you ever experience anti-Semitism related to your background?
Yeah, so my mother's from Mexico. My mother was born and raised in Mexico. My father's from California. My mother's side of the family, they were Mexican Jews. They went from being Cohens to Quiñoneses, and my grandfather actually converted to Catholicism so that he could marry my grandmother. So there's a very long story there, but at the end of the day, I am very proud to be a member of the Jewish community and have been very proud to be a member of it for years, and have been very involved in the community. We have a good amount of Mexican Jews in Arizona, which is why we're one of few states that has something called the Hispanic, the Jewish Latino Coalition that my sister did when we were in high school. And it's a great organization because it's through the Jewish Federation of Southern Arizona. And what it does, it brings Mexican Jews together to be able to learn about each other's culture and share the commonalities that we all have. So it was interesting during my election. I'm sure many of the folks who are watching know who David Duke is. And during my election time, he actually targeted me because of who I am and because of my background. So that was a very difficult thing to go through, only because that was the first time I actually experienced anti-Semitism and racism in such a way that it really was, you know, it hit to my core, and it really wasn't comfortable campaigning during that time, because getting a call from the Southern Poverty Law Center letting you know that they are, monitoring the situation, and that if there was anything I needed to reach out. It made me feel very unsafe at the beginning, but at the end of the day, after having conversations with my parents, we are very much aware that if something were to happen, it's not something we could prevent. So I did have I did fear a bit when I was running, but afterwards, I'm at the point where I don't care what anyone says about me, and it doesn't affect me in any way, shape, or form. So when people like David Duke try to come after me, or have very racist remarks or anti-Semitic remarks with me, it doesn't faze me anymore. And I think we need to be strong as a community and make sure that we push against it, because if we allow them to stop what we're doing, that's their goal, and I'm not going to allow it.
I love that. This next question is also in the comments. It kind of piggybacks off of what you were just talking about. How has your Mexican Jewish heritage influenced your support for Israel, and how do you coalition build with other minority groups, especially on college campuses? How do we as Jews build those relationships with other minority groups? Because sometimes it seems as though Jews are often left out of the minority narrative.
Yes, very much so. And I always find it interesting because folks assume because someone is Jewish that they're not a minority. And I always laugh about that, because technically we are minorities. So it is important when you're having conversations with individuals, whether it's on school campus or out in real life, in organizations and in the community, that we're sharing our personal stories, and we're also, connecting on a human level. I think that's one of the most important things when you're trying to network and trying to build coalitions, is the Hispanic and the Mexicans, Hispanic, Latinos, whatever someone considers themselves, because everyone has a different definition of what that means. At the end of the day, we're taught family values. We truly care, and family is everything to us. And it's the same thing in the Jewish community. And I think it's very important for us to be able to share those, we have common ground there, and share these conversations and talk about how our family is important to us and why why we do what we do. And it's so important for folks to bring in those people that don't necessarily know much about the Jewish community and involve them. I remember we used to do like a Shabbat, an interfaith Shabbat. There are so many folks that are so curious and they want to know, but we've never really had the opportunity to be involved. And I think that's one of the things, is that we need to do a better job of expanding our network and also working with groups that we don't necessarily think we would be working with. We have to be able to, sometimes we have to, I always tell people, you have to be okay with feeling uncomfortable. And that means going into spaces and circles sometimes that you're not always going to be in. So you have to be willing to put yourself out there if you want people to be able to put a human face to the issue. And that's part of what I've done over the years. It's been very easy to build the bridge between the Mexican community and the Jewish community, because again, there's so much that we have in common that I think it's important for people to be able to share those things. And whether it's inviting over, like I said, someone for Shabbat or a special holiday or a festival, it's important that we do that, because if we don't do it, no one is going to reach out and do it for us. So it's important that we, start those conversations early on too. You don't want, if there's issues, one of the biggest things that I saw in the community when I worked for JCRC, which is the Jewish Community Relations Council, I used to run it here in Southern Arizona. And my job was to build coalitions between the Hispanic and Latino community and Native American community, every community you can think of, build those coalitions. And one of the things that I found was people really were interested to learn about our community, but they didn't know how to even approach it. So I always put myself out there and made sure to connect with folks who are members of the community, and making sure that they were invited and that they felt that they could come to our events and that they could ask questions. Because there's one thing sitting down with someone over, dinner and having these conversations, but also, being able to go out in public and go to events and do things together where you're able to have conversations and they're able to ask you questions that they're very curious to ask you. And I'm sure it's the same vice versa, because there are many Jews who are very interested in learning about the Hispanic and Mexican culture. So I think it's just making sure that you're opening yourself up to those possibilities. I mean, everything is possible. You just have to be willing to it.
Thank you. The next question is, do you see our bipartisan relationship that we currently have with Israel potentially becoming a partisan issue in the future?
I feel that when it comes to Israel, you're always going to have someone who has something to say. And that's the way I see it is I think at the end of the day, you're never going to agree with someone on everything. That's just impossible. I don't know. I don't even agree with, so my brother's a legislator actually as well. He serves a different district, but we don't even agree on everything half the time. And that's just normal. That's a normal thing. You don't have to agree on every issue. But when it comes to Israel and the bipartisan work that we're doing, we have to make sure that it remains bipartisan and nonpartisan, because at the end of the day, it doesn't, folks who are living in Israel don't care whether you're a Republican or Democrat. They want to make sure that Israel has what it needs to be able to protect herself. And that's very important for us to all remember, is that we may not agree on political stances, but at the end of the day, we have to keep the issue of Israel bipartisan. And again, that means sometimes being in situations where you don't necessarily want to be in or feel comfortable in, but it's having those tough conversations with folks that many times you won't agree with, but you know that you have one thing in common, and that's protecting Israel. So that's been the way that I see it. You know, I know it's always going to be a controversial issue unless there's someday peace, unless one day we have peace, which I want nothing more. And I'm sure many of the folks who do work in Israel also feel that way, that they would want peace as well. But until that day comes, we're always going to have folks that are, you know, negative or have something to say horribly about Israel. But that's why we have to continue doing what we're doing to keep it, you know, bipartisan.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So the next question is, how did you know you wanted to be a representative, and what was the most challenging aspect of the job, and what is the most rewarding?
Yeah. So it's funny because I always knew I wanted to run for office, but I just didn't know when. It was honestly going to be a matter of when I would be running. I started my involvement in politics when I was 14. So I was pretty young. I was a freshman in high school, and I just loved politics. And by the way, my background's in public health. So I have both my undergrad and grad school from at the University of Arizona, and it's in public health. And I always wanted to go to medical school. That was the original plan. And I'm sure my mother is still sad at the fact that I didn't go to medical school, but it's never too late. So maybe someday. But you also in Arizona have to be 25 years old to be able to run for the legislature. And I knew I really wanted to do it. I ended up taking one semester and ended up moving. I was living in Baltimore, doing a program at Johns Hopkins in epidemiology and biostats, actually. And I was there, and I ended up finding out that the representative I had been helping for years since I was a teenager was no longer going to be running for re-election. And that almost never happens, where you have seats that just open up and that are open for you to run. And there's a lot of times it's difficult to run against an incumbent. But I said, you know what? I want to run. I turned 25 in April. This will be perfect. And I also thought about it, and I said, I have nothing to lose. I don't have a family. I mean, I do have a family. I just don't have an intermediate family. Like, I don't have children or a husband. So I felt it was perfect timing for me to do this. And I ended up coming back from Baltimore, launching my campaign. I ended up running against someone who had been there for 16 years. So that was really difficult. But I ended up, you know, coming out at the top, and I was very proud of the work in the campaign that I ran. I focused on 3 things, and that was education, criminal justice reform, and healthcare. And those were issues that the community that I serve really, really care about. So for me, I always knew I had like the political bug in me, and I knew I wanted to be involved in politics, but I didn't know when I would be running until I heard that there was an open seat. And I was told many times, I'm going to be honest, I won't sugarcoat it, that it wasn't my turn to run, that I should wait. I wasn't old enough. I wasn't seasoned enough. Oh my goodness, if I could get $1 for every time I was told I wasn't going to win, I would be very rich right now. But it was part of that. That was part of the reason that I was so excited and, you know, really wanting to run for office. So I ended up going for it, and now I'm running for re-election. I'm currently finishing my 2nd year in office. I'm really excited. You know, I was the youngest woman ever elected in the Arizona legislature, which is also a huge accomplishment for me. But what's one thing that's very rewarding in this job is that I actually can do things to help the community. You know, it's one thing to just have the title, and I don't really care much about the title. I'm more excited to be able to do the everyday work. You know, right now, especially during the pandemic situation, we have folks who are constantly calling my office, emailing, calling. People send me messages on social media asking me for help. And I'm just really excited that I'm able to do that as a representative. We have a lot of I guess, power, I would say, unfortunately, but we are able to actually move and help the members of our community when it's needed. So that's one of the rewarding jobs. One of the aspects to my job is being able to help folks in my community.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask the last question here.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to college students today who look up to you and would like to follow in your footsteps and take on their own government position?
Yeah. So I would first and foremost say, don't let anyone tell you that you're not good enough. Don't let anyone tell you that you shouldn't be running, because if it's something you want to do and you're passionate about it, you will win. You have to be able to, ignore what everyone else tells you, and you have to do it for yourself. And that was one of the things that when I was told not to run, I actually used that as an incentive to run. I said, people are telling me not to run, that it's not my turn. Like, I'm going to show them. And I think that we need more people that are like that are willing to take that step and willing to be proactive and say, you know what, I want to do the work and I'm going to run. So I would tell anyone who's interested in politics or interested in running for office, do it. Don't let anyone stop you, because the only person that's going to stop you is yourself. But also be committed and pick an area that you really truly care about and fight for it. And that's what I've been able to do. And, I didn't mention, one thing I forgot was I had a bill on mandatory Holocaust education. And that bill is extremely important. It also died in the Senate, but it was an important bill for many reasons. And I want to remind folks that when we're doing things, we have to do it, on behalf of the community as well. I had been working with a group of Holocaust survivors who truly, truly wanted to see the day that Arizona would mandate Holocaust education. And most importantly, because of the rise of anti-Semitism in the country. So I'm really sad that it died, but I will be bringing it back. That's going to be like my baby legislation, which is what I'm going to call it now, because you have to find those things that you're passionate about and what gets you excited to wake up every morning. I really hope that those who are watching, interested in being involved in politics, that they do what they really want to do. And don't let anyone tell you otherwise, because they're honestly crazy. I was told many times, and like I said, now I'm sitting as a sitting rep, and I'm really excited for what the future will hold. You never know. And people always ask me, like, what is the next step here? And I'm really happy where I am at the legislature, but who knows, maybe I'll run for something else later down the road. But right now, I'm really happy and excited to be where I am. So I would encourage anyone, especially women, run for office. We love having you there. It's always an exciting thing to be able to do it. So.
Well, I want to thank you so much for, somebody said VP Hernandez.
Right.
Thank you so much for speaking with us today. It's truly an honor to have,
of course,
you talking to us. And I know so many people look up to you. We have people praising you on our Facebook right now. It's truly inspiring to have a Jewish woman running things in her state. I love the great state of Arizona, and I'm so glad that you're willing to take the time with SSI to give us your story and talk with our students. And I encourage everybody to follow Representative Hernandez on all of her social media. This video will be posted on our YouTube page as well as Facebook, so please check that out. And I, again, thank you so much, and we are rooting for you.
I appreciate it. Thank you for organizing this, and to all the students that are experiencing any issues on their campuses, please feel free to reach out to your electeds. I think it's important for people to hear what's going on, especially on school campuses. We have to continue the fight against BDS. It's probably never going to stop, and we have to be vigilant. We have to make sure that we're staying on top of it all. So want to thank you for all the work that you guys do and everyone who joined today. Also, I realize it says Daniel Hernandez. That's my brother. I'm using his laptop, sorry. But I just wanted to thank you all for doing this. And if you have any questions that you were embarrassed to ask publicly, message me on social media. I am happy to answer any question that any of you have. And it's great seeing you all. Bye.
Thank you so much.